They say timing is everything. And for weeks, I thought I had it all perfectly timed. I had reserved her favorite rooftop restaurant, the one where we had our first kiss on a breezy September night, 3 years ago. I made sure we'd get our usual table near the edge of the terrace, overlooking the city skyline that always made her eyes light up. I even asked the chef to prepare her favorite dessert, creme brulee with lavender and sea salt, something she once jokingly called the way to her heart. I had the night scripted down to the smallest detail. From the cab ride, to when I'd reach into my jacket pocket, to the way I'd slowly lower myself to one knee. The velvet box had lived in my sock drawer for 2 months. I had opened and closed it dozens of times, practicing my line. Emily, I want to build a life with you. Every boring Tuesday, every chaotic Saturday, every moment. She didn't know I'd been secretly saving for the ring. She didn't know I'd called her dad last week to ask for his blessing, old-fashioned, sure, but meaningful. She didn't know I'd almost cried when I picked it up. What I didn't know was that she was about to beat me to the punch. Not with a yes. Not even with a no. But with something far more disorienting. Just as the appetizers were cleared, and I was giving the waiter the discreet nod to prepare for the proposal, she leaned forward, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and dropped this line. Have you ever thought about opening up our relationship? I froze. Time didn't slow down. It stopped entirely. I blinked once. Twice. I smiled awkwardly, waiting for the punchline. But her face was deadly serious, almost glowing, like someone proud of finally saying something brave. I wanted to believe I had misheard her. I wanted to believe it was a hypothetical, a book club topic, a podcast she stumbled on. But she kept going. She'd been reading about it, she said, exploring the idea, listening to people's growth journeys. She talked about how monogamy was a construct. How sexual exclusivity wasn't the same as emotional loyalty. She used words like freedom, trust, and expansion. She talked and talked and talked, and all I could hear was the sound of glass shattering somewhere deep inside me. Because I was still holding the ring box. Because I was planning to ask her to be mine and only mine for life. Because I didn't want to share her. Not emotionally. Not physically. Not fractionally. She thought she was being modern, mature, philosophical. But to me, it felt like a breakup disguised as an invitation to evolve. I remember watching her mouth move, nodding like I understood, like I wasn't being gutted alive in real time. I asked a few questions, the kind you ask just to buy time. Where did this idea come from? Are you saying you want to see other people? She laughed and said no, not like that, not right away. That it was just a conversation. But people don't float ideas like that unless they've already imagined it. Unless they've already tested it, mentally, emotionally, or worse. I didn't bring up the ring. I didn't propose. How could I? How do you ask someone to be your forever when they're suggesting that forever include other people? By the time the dessert arrived, she was smiling. She thought she'd just opened the door to something exciting. She had no idea she'd slammed the door shut on the life I had pictured with her. And the ring in my pocket? It never saw the light of day. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it was just a conversation. That maybe Emily was curious, not committed. That she was floating a theoretical idea, not laying the groundwork for something already in motion. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. Because the alternative? That she had already emotionally, maybe even physically, left the relationship and was now just easing me into the fallout. That idea kept me up at night. But once a seed like that is planted, your mind becomes a minefield. Suddenly, every behavior you once brushed off feels suspicious. The late-night text with no explanation. The phone flipped face down during dinner. The new workout routine. The sudden obsession with me time. Before that rooftop dinner, I trusted her completely. After it, I started noticing everything. She was spending more time with her coworker friends, started going to drinks after work more often, and coming home later than usual. Started locking her phone, not just with a passcode, but with a new privacy setting that kept notifications hidden, even on the lock screen. I didn't want to be that guy. You know, the one who snoops. The one who reads too much into things. But when someone you love hands you a map to the edge of a cliff, you start looking at every step more carefully. One night, I asked her casually if she'd thought more about what she said at dinner. She smiled and said, I think we're strong enough to try something new. Don't you want us to grow? I said, grow into what? Her answer, whatever we want. Together or separately. Maybe both. That's when I knew. This wasn't a thought experiment. This was the beginning of the end. masked as evolution. And suddenly, the proposal I didn't deliver wasn't just a missed moment. It was the best mistake I never made. I wish I could say I had some grand plan, that I set out to catch her, record proof, confront her with cold, hard evidence. But the truth? I was just tired of feeling paranoid, tired of second-guessing every glance, every late return, every half-hearted kiss goodnight. That night started like any other. Emily said she had a team dinner, some after-hours thing at a coworker's apartment. I asked who was going, and she rattled off a list of names I barely recognized, adding, "Don't wait up." So I didn't. Instead, I waited quietly. I never considered myself the jealous or possessive type, but something inside me snapped. Or maybe it clicked. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. I drove to the neighborhood she mentioned, parked a few blocks down. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But then, I saw her car, and one floor above it, the lights in an apartment flickered to life. Curtains open, just for a moment. Two silhouettes. Closed. Too close. I stayed there for over an hour. Long enough to see the lights go off. Long enough to feel the pit in my stomach hollow out completely. I didn't knock, didn't rage, didn't cause a scene. I just left. And when she got home hours later, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, not a single mention of the team dinner. I simply said, "Hope you had fun." She smiled and said, "It was enlightening." That was all I needed. I didn't cry. Not that night. Because when the truth finally settles in, it doesn't arrive like thunder. It sinks in like ice. I went to bed early. She slept next to me, and I laid there in the dark, heart racing, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I ever thought this woman was my forever. The next day, I started making my move. Not to win her back. But to quietly disappear from her world before she could fracture mine any further. The beauty of silence is that it says everything, without giving anyone a chance to argue. After that night, I began to retreat, not physically, at first, but emotionally. The version of me she used to know, the one that used to hold her hand in public, bring her tea in bed, smile when she laughed, he started to fade. Slowly, strategically, I stopped trying to talk to, stopped asking about her day. Stopped pretending I didn't see through her every excuse. Instead, I began to plan. I transferred the money from our shared savings to a private account. I moved a few essentials into a storage unit under my name. I made a list of everything I'd need to untangle myself from her. Utilities, subscriptions, shared passwords, the lease, and the ring. The one I nearly gave her that night. I sold it. Didn't even hesitate. A week later, I waited until she was out, yoga and smoothies, with the same coworker whose apartment I had once staked out, and I packed my things. Quietly, methodically. By the time she got back, the apartment was cleaner than usual. But the closet was half empty. The dresser drawers were bare. And my key was sitting on the counter next to a simple, folded note. You wanted freedom. Now you have it. No drama. No fights. Just space. Goodbye. Then I blocked her on everything. Phone, social media, email. Even Venmo. It was the kindest exit I could give her. No begging. No confrontation. Just a disappearing act she never saw coming. Because if someone doesn't value your presence, the most powerful thing you can do is remove it entirely. It's been over 3 months since I walked out of her life and quietly reclaimed mine. At first, the silence was deafening. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that echoes, bouncing off the walls of every room I used to picture us growing old in. I'd wake up and instinctively reach for my phone to text her, before remembering she no longer lived in that version of my world. I'd come home from work and expect to hear her humming in the kitchen or asking me to taste some new wine she pretended to know things about. But she wasn't there. And the quiet left room for something I hadn't made space for in a long time: clarity. In that clarity, I saw just how much I had been shrinking to fit the relationship. I remembered how often I bit my tongue to avoid conflict. How many times I let small lies slide, convincing myself they weren't deal breakers. How I accepted emotional distance, hoping affection would return like a season. But love isn't meant to be rationed. You're not supposed to compete with possibilities or negotiate for someone's attention. If someone truly wants you, they don't offer you half of themselves while auditioning others for the rest. When Emily suggested that open relationships would help us grow, I now realize she wasn't offering growth. She was offering escape. A backup plan. An exit strategy disguised as evolution. And I was seconds away from giving her a ring, a symbol of forever, while she was preparing to give someone else the very intimacy I believed was ours alone. Some nights, I still think about the version of her I loved. The version that looked at me like I was her safe place. The version who once cried when I surprised her with a weekend getaway just because. I think I missed that version. But then I remind myself she wasn't real anymore. That woman stopped choosing me long before I stopped trying. And that's the most brutal truth to face. You can love someone with your whole heart and still be wrong for them. Worse, they might already know that and just not tell you. Today, I'm rebuilding. Not in grand ways, no major reinventions or dramatic Instagram-worthy comebacks. But in the small things. I eat slower. I sleep better. I've started reading again fiction, the kind I used to love before I started living in someone else's fantasy. I no longer feel the need to explain my pain to anyone. And I don't romanticize what we had. Because if it were truly love, it wouldn't have required me to question my worth. So if you're in a place where someone makes you feel like love must be stretched, diluted, or shared to survive, hear this. Love doesn't demand sacrifice of your dignity. It doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. And it never, ever asks you to compete with ghosts. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away quietly, without revenge, without chaos, and leave the door locked behind you. Not for them. But for yourself. Because healing isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about remembering who you are. And I'm finally starting to remember.